Welcome again to another Curator's Chat. I'm Jason French, Curator of Collections at the Behringer-Crawford Museum. Today we're not at the Behringer-Crawford Museum, we're actually at the Gateway Museum in Maysville, Kentucky. It's a wonderful little museum, and we're going to be talking with Danny Weddle a little bit about the history of a community not far from here, community of Old Washington.
When I do tours, I have people imagine a bicycle wheel. We are the hub of that wheel, and I'm going to mention a bunch of names, and those names are going to represent a spoke in that bicycle wheel. And usually when we do an hour trolley tour, I fill that wheel out. But it does have a fascinating history. Actually, the first county seat of Mason County was Washington, which is about 5 miles south of here. It's actually now a part of Maysville. They were merged in 1990. But when the settlers came down the river, there were still threats of Indian attacks here on the Ohio riverbanks. So they located up the hill about 4 or 5 miles away. Simon Kenton was one of the early explorers and pioneers. He surveyed, had a lot of land, and two people, William Wood, a Baptist minister, and Arthur Fox, a surveyor, purchased land from Simon Kenton for Washington. And they laid out, if you look at some of the early atlases, it's kind of like two rectangles put together, because there's 3 main streets in Washington, and they put those together. If you look at those early atlases, they really did a nice job of laying out the town. But the first courthouse was there. In fact, Washington was the county seat until 1848. Once the steamboat era came, Maysville grew much more than Washington did, and they went to the legislature and finally got the legislature to approve moving the county seat to Maysville. But Washington has a fascinating history. I mentioned those early settlers, but Harriet Beecher Stowe actually visited Washington. Elizabeth Key was a student of hers, and she comes back to town. Elizabeth's father, Marshall Key, was a clerk, and he takes Elizabeth and Harriet and another teacher, Mary Dutton, down to the courthouse square, just a couple of blocks from his house, and they witness a slave auction. And she mentions a slave auction in Washington in Uncle Tom's Cabin. Now it goes even crazier from there. Albert Sidney Johnston was a Confederate general who was born in Washington, and he was killed at the Battle of Shiloh. It was a blow to the Confederacy. Well, when his family moved out, the Nelson family moved in. Both families were doctors' families. William Bull Nelson grew up in that same house. Bull Nelson was with Grant on the north at the Battle of Shiloh. So in this one house, you had 2 generals, guys that grew up to be generals on opposite sides. It gets even crazier. Elizabeth Key marries Thomas Nelson, who is Bull Nelson's brother. And Thomas Nelson had a fascinating career. He was actually ambassador to Chile. Lincoln appointed him to Chile. While he's in Chile, there's a great fire at a Catholic church, one of the biggest fires in the history of the world. And he goes down and rescues a lot of people and is a hero there. Later, when Grant is president, Nelson is appointed to Mexico. That's where Elizabeth actually dies. Then you've got the Marshall family. John Marshall's parents actually lived in Washington. His younger brother moved to Washington, built a log cabin. The parents were in central Kentucky. They moved to Washington, helping build this big mansion out there, Federal Hill. And there's no record that John Marshall ever came here, but both of his parents died there. So I feel like, John Marshall probably came and at least came to the funeral. John Chambers, he came here as a teenager, became an attorney at a young age. He actually serves with William Henry Harrison in the War of 1812. Harrison appoints him to be the 2nd territorial governor of Iowa. Well, Harrison only lives a month as president, and Chambers, in his autobiography, claims that he was with William Henry Harrison when he died, closed his eyes. Chambers goes on to serve as the 2nd territorial governor of Iowa, does a lot of great stuff out there negotiating with Indians. It's just layer after layer. I tell people it's like peeling the skin off an onion, because you just find more and more. William Goforth, a famous doctor in Cincinnati, he actually came down the river, set up a practice in Washington. So it goes on and on. Like every day I try to find out something about the community. I actually live in Washington. It has an amazing history for such a small town, and the history is remarkable.
I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you do like it, feel free to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on our next Curator's Chat.